Thursday, May 2nd at 6 o'clock. First item on the agenda is call to order and the adoption of the agenda. Can I get a,
I make a motion that we adopt the agenda.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
And we have the approval of the minutes of April 4th, 2024.
Make a motion to approve those minutes.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Clerk, do we have anyone for public comment?
Yes, Phyllis Umbarger from 126 Siegel Lane.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you all allowed me to speak today. I am new to the area. I purchased a home at 126 Siegel Lane, and we have run into a little zoning issue. The time of purchase, it was told that we have no HOA, which is great and wonderful. But now we have common area. We would like to know, as a group, how we can get that changed. It's an issue as to, number one, who pays the taxes, who controls those areas. It's the front, which is the driveway, and it's also the back of our houses. So we're just at a standstill.
What was the last question? Who controls the area and what was the last one?
The taxes.
Okay. The common area, I'm sorry. I thought that there was another question after who controls the areas. I thought there was another.
It's
Okay. It was just a comment.
It's
Okay.
the front area, which is the gravelled parking lot, or the driveway. That's a common area. And our backyard is the common area. So my neighbor could park her car in my driveway, and I couldn't do anything about it. She could build a fire pit in my backyard, and I couldn't do anything about it.
I know what they're talking about.
Because it's a common area. So we just need some clarification as to what we can do to get that rezoned so that property belongs to me. My area belongs to me. Her area belongs to her.
Thank you. That's not really,
They're going as far as saying that little common area, it's a small amount of money, but they're going to say if one day, 10 years from now, somebody goes back and says, that little area accumulated this type of tax, now we're going to charge for it. And the person next door to you not going to pay that part. It's a split. It says they can take both units because it's zoned as one unit with common areas, what it's zoned as.
Yeah.
Sir, what is your name, please?
I'm Curtis Andrews. I live at 136.
Thank you.
and you live at 126?
126, and we have some of our neighbors here also.
And it's the same thing on the whole street?
It's the whole, it's the properties that, what,
It's 4 units with 2 townhomes together on each one of the units.
and they're building more. The same Mr. Wellman,
So it'd be 21
Wellman
buildings.
Construction.
It's all the same way.
Oh, they're in the section, in the square.
That's what they're saying. Instead of just surveying and saying there's, two units on, this is what the deed shows, your area. Somehow they zoned it with common area and would continue marching on. Now they're building 8 brand new ones next to us, and they're all gonna be zoned the same way too.
I have copies, well, I have my common area, if you want to.
No, what I would like, this is coming up tonight. I'm aware of the situation on the peripheral, but before I speak in a public meeting, as you know, I would like to,
Do some investigation.
prepare something. So I would have something prepared to report back to the planning board at your next meeting, but basically, this is the development that was approved, reviewed by the planning board, approved by the Board of Aldermen for the rezoning to R8. It used, it was the Kathy, it was formerly the Kathy something property up and around the T-Bar Seagull
Square,
and
yeah.
New River Inlet Road. That was, that we worked with the owner, to develop the property or to approve the property to R8. And it existed as 8,000 square foot lots, but it was zoned B1. And so it made sense to zone it to R8, even though the minimum dimensional, or the most zone, or the highest zoning density per our land use plan was R10. It doesn't make sense to zone something R10 whenever it didn't meet that minimum dimensional requirement of 10,000 square feet. And so it was zoned residential R8 to facilitate duplexes. So duplexes are by definition, and it's the same in building code. There's a difference between duplex and townhouses. Duplexes are considered one structure with 2 units. And so if you have an 8,000 square foot lot and it's zoned R8, then you can't further subdivide that, because then that would not meet the minimum dimensional requirements. Okay, and typically how the duplexes are done, and I believe this is the same way in Surf City and a lot of other localities define them and treat them the same way in their zoning ordinance, is that you'll have 2 units and they may be owned by different entities, but they share a tenants in common with the land. They'll have a 50% share of the land in common. So all of that should have been addressed by, the closing attorney and Mr. Wellman or Mr. Rodriguez, whoever sold, or the buyer's agent, whoever sold the property, whoever was involved in that transaction, to make that clear to the buyers whenever they bought that property.
Wouldn't that be on the survey?
I don't know how it was
Yeah,
presented, because
okay.
I wasn't part of that part.
Right.
So
They walked the lot with you. I told you this.
That was, yeah.
The walls are actually, they're built brand new, and there's like 3 inches between the 2 of them, it's just cut it up. So they walked the lot with you, they tell you, from your driveway all the way back to the back part over there, they walked the whole lot, this is yours, and that's your neighbor's, and that's essentially how they walk through everybody's lots.
Yeah.
And told everybody, and that's how you think of it, with 2 townhouses side by side with a little, separated by a little 2-inch gap in between them, that this area D-bar is ours, and that's his. You have any problems with the roof or anything like that, that's up between the 2 people that live there. But the land was walked off and said it should be, that driveway all the way back from the back part should be mine, and next door Tom should have his from his driveway all the way back.
And I don't think any of us had the same realtor. So they got their information from somewhere. These realtors did, to portray it to us. And it didn't come to my attention until we got a deed amendment. And I was like, well, what is this? And it was stating the common area. But nothing was really changed. So it's so confusing.
It was probably just the language that they used to describe the tenants in common, or the common area, for that lot of the 2 units. I don't know, because like I said, I haven't read your deeds. I'm not,
Well, it's,
I haven't been involved in that.
Dave amended, I think mine in 5 March, when I called the tax office, he had it all there, the guy there was really good, Travis. And he said, yep, this page of the deed, that 800 page of the deed, and then also in March, he corrected, it says, the deed. But it does, he later says, this really doesn't say anything about correcting on the March 5th thing that Dave wanted to put in.
So who was your closing attorney?
Kyle from Wilmington.
So my recommendation is that you would discuss this with your closing attorney.
Well, yeah, like I said, her attorney told her one thing, mine told me different. It's like, get your neighbors to go in and sign a legal document saying that you give your common area to him and he gives your, you go like that. It's like, we're around in circles again, that's what we're saying. Is there possibility, anything that, from here? And then we know, like the tax law says, well, this won't happen this year. So we're not really worried about this year. We want for longevity in case one of us dies on a sell property. We're not stuck with saying, guys, you got a 10-foot common area in your backyard that belongs to your neighbor, and if he doesn't pay the tax on it, they can take the whole lot there from you.
Traditionally, what happens is that when, like, say, if you, again, I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't work for the tax office.
This really isn't the place for,
Well, these are legal questions that
Right.
that you
yeah,
know
we
I
can't
don't.
answer.
These are legal questions, which is why I would really recommend that they speak to their closing attorney about it. And if they're not satisfied with their closing attorney, perhaps
Come
another land use attorney would be better. But to rezone the property is, I don't think that that's going to be a remedy. And I'm not sure how it would be. And to reclassifying what was built in the permits when we have historically, in our ordinance, we define, and the building code defines what a duplex is, and we define what multifamily and what townhouses are. And so we have one situation where whatever it is that's going on, and if there is a miscommunication or a disagreement, I'm not sure what it is, but rezoning is not the answer. And I've had a conversation with, I've had previous discussions on this, and if someone wants to apply for a rezoning application or a redevelopment application or whatever it is that someone would like to do, and they would like to bring that forward to the planning board, and for the planning board to review it and make a recommendation one way or another to the Board of Aldermen, you're more than welcome to do that. I cannot support that, depending on what it is, but I will say I'm reluctant to support anything that is not consistent with both the land use, with the CAMA land use plan, as well as with the zoning ordinance, as well as sound planning principles that we've been doing. So, it's the consistency. We have to, the way that we do permits, the way that we process applications, it's the consistency that is that solid planning, thoughtfulness. Right. And, one of the things that we had discussed, whenever you go from like R10 to R8 to R5, whenever you increase that density, for the past several years, the town manager has heard a lot of complaints in those folks that live here. I'm sure have heard complaints about the neighbors and experienced lack of water pressure. The amount of development that we have experienced since Florence even is unprecedented, and it is pressing the infrastructure that we do have. So that acreage was reviewed. It went through a technical review committee. It was presented to the planning board. It was presented to the Board of Aldermen. The application was made by the owner, and I believe he's still the current owner. And it was really for the units that he had, and for the lots that they had, and to have duplexes in there, that was about the most that you could fit in there. And even at that is dense.
Right.
Now, we listen
Right.
to duplex or townhouses. We're side by side, I want you 3 levels higher. Are we townhouses versus duplexes? Duplexes
You're 2 units on one lot, and you're permitted, whenever you look at your building permit, you're permitted as a duplex. Okay, townhouses are considered 3 units or more. Okay,
Could I ask one more question, please? Who owns the property? That's my question. Who owns the property in front of my house and behind my house?
do you have a plat? Do you have a plat? Were you given a plat of your property whenever you went to closing, when you were given a deed?
Yes. Yes. But now they're saying it's a common area between my neighbor and myself only, who is not here. I did go see an attorney.
And how did the attorney explain to you what the ownership was?
He said to me that he had never seen anything like this before. And he's from your area. I'm not from your area. I just moved here.
Who
I'm
was
not
the-
going to call his name. I just moved here. So if it comes down to it, then I can have him down here. He's taken this over for me. But he said, number one, the first thing you need to do is come and speak to you, Ms. Hill, which I have sent you emails. I've done phone calls with no reply. And the next thing is for you to decide. It's on, the burden's on your back. It's not on mine. I just want what's mine, what I paid for, what I know that when my time on this earth is gone, that my children can come back and say, this is mine. I don't want them to have to go down this road. All I want to do is retire here and be happy and be part of the community. That's what I want. And it's like one thing after another, after another, after another is happening. I just want my little plot. That's all I want. I want to pay my taxes and know that somebody's not going to come back and get it. That's all I want. And I don't want somebody building a fire pit in the middle of my little plot. I want to be able to say, no, you're not going to build a fire pit in the middle of the backyard. Or I don't want your people that are renting from you. I'm not a renter. That's my home. That's going to be my home. I don't want them putting their RV in my driveway. And I can't do a thing about it. Not a thing. So, Miss Hill, I'm asking you, please, please help us do something. If I had known this, I would not have bought. Because an HOA was a breaker for me. It was a deal breaker for me. And if I had known this the day that I signed, I would have let them have my $25,000 and I'd have walked away. Because I don't like this. I don't like it. Thank you. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
Anyone else signed up to talk?
No, ma'am.
Anyone else have a comment? Okay, we'll close. Discussion, APA video training, staff reports.
We'll get started on the video in a little bit, and I handed out kind of a sample. I didn't give like the past one that has all the information. I think that all of you have seen it enough. This is kind of a standard template that I start off with on most all of the staff reports that I do. There might be some little nuance changes, but basically this is the standardized version that I use. And one of the things that I like about it is that talks about the comprehensive plan, which, as you know, is the Camel Land Use Plan. So it's kind of a cue for me to reference how the application or the request meets or is not consistent with the Camel Land Use Plan. Gives a little history of the background of the property to include, and that's kind of a reminder to check with building inspections, fire chief, public works, NCDOT. And then down at the attachments, there would be a number of attachments, whether it was a public notice or the deed of the property, plat of the property, etc. So it's all fairly self-explanatory. And when you get to the responsive standards, generally, if it's a rezoning or whatever the request is, I'll pull out the section of the Uniform Development Ordinance, and the shalls or the guidelines out of the UDO become the response to standards. So I'll just make that kind of a bullet form, and then I'll put whether it does or does not meet in that area. So I think that kind of helps, and it helps both the planning board and the Board of Adjustment whenever you're used to seeing things in the same format. You're used to looking at, does she have the zoning, what's the zoning, what's the size, compatible uses, etc. And one of the, one of the challenges is some individuals need more detail and more information, and some individuals don't want to go through 20 pages of detail. They want a Reader's Digest condensed version synopsis of what the report is. So this is kind of like a cover sheet that gives you the straight skinny, and then the attachments will hopefully fill in the detail. And by the time that you've gone through that, hopefully that is the documentation to provide to be able to make a determination or make a recommendation, come to a consensus on the request. So we can talk about how you feel about that standardization or that format later, and if you want to go ahead and get started on the video, we can do that.
Hello, I'm Michael Blue, and we're here today talking about how to build a better staff report. I'm here with Arnie Johnson from Kansas University, and we're going to start by just talking about why is the staff report important? Maybe you've got a story or an example that tells us.
Well, a staff report is important to a planning commission because it's the background information, the analysis that the planning commission needs to really evaluate an application and make a decision, make an informed decision of to approve, deny, approve with conditions, or continue to a future meeting a particular application. For myself, I was a practicing planner for 8 years and wrote tons of staff reports. But then later on, when I went back to graduate school to get my PhD, I became a planning commissioner in my own community of Lawrence, Kansas. And so it was really when I became a planning commissioner, and all I had to rely on were those staff reports. that I really started to understand why they're important and how a planning commissioner uses them. And so I was a graduate student working on my dissertation, and so like many planning commissioners, didn't have a lot of time. And so I would read the staff reports often I have to say the night before the meeting, and try to figure out what's going on. And I found that, I'm no longer immersed in the city's comprehensive plan. I no longer know the zoning ordinance inside and out. And so I had to rely on that staff report, and I just felt like the rest of the story was missing. And I would then come to the planning commission meeting and feel like I don't really know what's going on. And I thought, myself being a former planner, I'm struggling to really understand what's the right thing to do. What's the amateur planner who really doesn't know about planning? What's it like for them?
So that creates a situation where the staff report's got to cover a lot of ground, yet it's got to do it efficiently and make it easy to read. And I spent a little bit of time as a planning commissioner as well, and I know that you get that packet and you open it and you're excited to see what's going to happen, but you're kind of hoping it's not that long because there's a lot going on. So we'll cover some ground on how to find that balance point. But so maybe we could start by talking about what makes a good staff report, right? So what should always be in one, and how do you distinguish between a good one and one that's not so good?
Okay, well, and I should say that how I've come up with this, what makes a good staff report, is after reading over 250 staff reports from all across the country and from little towns and big cities. So I have put in my time with staff reports. And what I found most useful and what seemed to work really well is it's essential to have a cover page. And not just any cover page. The cover page should be that essential information that a planning commissioner needs, that, if they don't read anything else, they have that. And so that cover page should have some kind of background information, the property owner, the location, maybe even a small location map, where this application is in the city. And kind of information on the property, the land use, the surrounding land uses. But then the really good cover pages also have a small summary of what is this application all about. And then the other ones that are really good have the recommendation on the cover as well. And so, it's really here's the pertinent information, and then the rest of the staff report fleshes that out and gives more information. But you've got that good cover page that covers the bases. Also, what makes a good cover page is there might be things that your particular planning commission is interested in, like the arterial road fee or floodplain. And maybe that goes on the cover as well, because the planning commission's always going to be interested in that.
So we know that staff reports are going to vary.
Yes.
What they include, how long they are, all that. But the idea of a cover page that's there if somebody doesn't have the time to read the whole thing, or if during the meeting they want to go back and kind of catch up on something they didn't remember.
Right.
That cover page is key. It's a real tool for the commissioner.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and I've even seen one cover page where the staff put a proposed motion as well. So really, just think about that as what's the essential information for the planning commission, their cheat sheet, in other words. And then you can start getting into more details, particularly the analysis of how does this application fit into the future plans of the community? I mean, that's really the heart of why we're doing these staff reports, is what does this mean for the community? And we have these plans of what we want to be in the future. How does this application fit in with that?
That's great. So set some of the context. It's not just a building and a site.
So I think that's essential for the staff report to do. But then maps. That you can show a lot with a map of, you know, where this is, what's the context, and photos. I mean, it used to be that it was a big deal to put a photo in a staff report. And you even had to go and take slides to show a slide at the meeting. Well, now, digital cameras, camera on your phone, you can go out to the site, look around, take photos of the surrounding area, things that are pertinent, and then put that into your staff report. And that can, you know, those sorts of photos and maps can save you a lot of words and help people understand what you're talking about. You're talking about erosion in the floodplain, well, show it. The planning commissioner can then see, oh, that's what they're talking about. That does look like that's a problem. So maps, photos, and then putting it into easy to navigate format. So have a template where, you know, the usual information is in the usual places. Maybe tables that show how does this meet our arterial road impact fee? Does this impact schools? What neighborhood association is this in? Kind of those sort of checklist things that you can put in a table, and those are always in the same place.
And over time, a staff member will learn, you know, the commission always asks about this, or this has been an issue in the community, or last time we talked about it. So making sure that that's in there and easy to find almost as a checklist or a checkbox.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's good for the planning commission. So the planning commissioner that's really interested in schools, and they wonder, well, did the planners really check on the impact of schools? They can see, oh, yeah, they did check. So that's helpful to have that in there. And then you can do things to help make it easy to navigate, like say those tables that can be almost like checklists, and then have sidebars that have educational information. If the commission hasn't dealt with the tree ordinance in a while, well, you can put in that sidebar, here's our tree ordinance, here's why it's important. We started it in 1992 when the beloved cottonwood tree in the middle of town was cut down. I mean, you can kind of educate people with those sidebars as well. And then use a box or highlight things to show this is really important. Some communities on their staff reports put the recommendation in a box, so it's always easy to find and just make it easy to navigate.
Let me go to something we're going to talk about a little later, but you mentioned a few times the recommendation in a staff report. Not every staff report has a recommendation, not every town likes or wants there to be a recommendation in a staff report. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you found regarding when and why staff reports have recommendations and maybe some of the pluses and minuses.
I, as a practicing planner, had always worked for a community that they wanted a recommendation. So when I started doing research around the country, I ran into communities that they didn't have the recommendation in the staff report, and I then would call up the planner and say, what's going on here? And they would say, oh, our planning commission doesn't want us to put a recommendation in there. And I thought, oh, what's going on with that? And it really is that the planning commission, they are the ones making the decisions. And some of them don't necessarily want that recommendation ahead of time that would color their thoughts. I mean, they really want to make the decision themselves. And it also makes it clear to citizens, the applicants, this is the planning commission and then the city commission or city council making the decision. We are in democracies, and it's other citizens making the decision. It's other citizens telling the property owner this is what you can and can't do with your property. It's not a bureaucrat or staff saying that. It's other citizens, and there's something really powerful in that as well. I can see the flip side to that is the planner is sitting there saying, I think about this all the time.
Yeah.
I often have a master's degree. I know the plan inside and out. I make it my business to really know the community, and I want to share that information with the planning commission through a recommendation and really share my expertise. So I can see from the planner's point of view that you know, and many planners go into the profession because they want help. And so there's, let me help you, let me give you my expertise. But it's really going to be each community figuring out how they want to use the expertise of their planners, how that would be shared, that sort of thing.
So there's no right or wrong. There's not you have to have or you can't have. It's a local preference that develops over time.
Right.
Maybe something that it's worth the planners having a discussion with the staff, with their elected officials or the planning commission or maybe the administration.
Yeah.
So let's go back to staff reports.
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk about what, you talked about some of the things that make for a good staff report. What are some of the pitfalls that you've seen looking at all those staff reports that you think people should avoid?
Well, one of the big pitfalls is no maps or maps that really aren't helpful. I mean, there's some maps that they'll show the location of the site, and it's so zoomed in that it's a building and that's it. And if you're not really familiar with the community or that particular location, that map's not going to help you very much. And it seemed like a lot of the staff reports would have a map of that particular location, but not where it was in the city. So having a map of where it is in the city is a good thing to help people, you know, visualize it. Also, no photos. Just to be able to give people a visual idea of what's going on in case they haven't been able to go out and look for themselves. So no photos is an issue. Repetition. We kind of as planners get into, well, we've got the background and then here's our analysis, and then we, in the analysis, go over the background again, and so we're repeating ourselves over and over again. And that just makes it to where there's so much that a planning commissioner has to wade through, and then they're starting to gloss over things because, oh, yeah, you told me that. So trying to be efficient with that sort of information is key so that you're not just repeating yourself over and over again. I think in trying to create this legal foundation for decision making, planners often just dump information into a staff report. They put in everything, including the kitchen sink, and it's too much. You know, a planning commissioner is trying to be very diligent, and they'll get this 80 to 100 page staff report, and like, oh, do I have to read it all?
Yes, everything.
And they might give it a good try, but then the whole point of the staff report gets lost in all of that information. So just that being very efficient and not just throwing everything in. Remember the point of the staff report. We're trying to get across information to the Planning Commission so they can decide what's in the best interest of the community. So keep coming back to that and focusing on that, and that should help you cut down on the repetition.
You mentioned the 100-page staff report. Is there a right answer for how long a staff report should be? Is there a too long or a too short?
You know, I do wonder about the 80 to 100 page staff reports. Is that really helpful or not? Because you do always have the file as your kind of foundation for the report. My colleague and I have done a study of staff reports, and we've looked at, we created a staff report evaluation tool where we just listed the traditional things that are in a staff report, and then some modern things that go into staff reports, and some modern ways of formatting a staff report. We took that tool and evaluated staff reports from across the country. And we discovered that lots of pages didn't necessarily mean that the staff report hit those items on our evaluation tool. We found that the ones that seemed to do a good job of hitting kind of the traditional items, property owner, do they have street access, those traditional things that you would have in a staff report. And then the ones that would do some formatting, things like having tables, having photographs, things like that. Those sorts of reports, they fell between 5 and 10 pages. So kind of 8 pages on average was what you needed to have good coverage, but then also have your maps and your photographs. Because maps and photographs and tables are going to take up more room. They're going to add pages. So don't be afraid of, oh my gosh, we're getting into 10 pages. Well, part of those 10 pages are some great photos, some great graphs that are going to help people understand what's going on.
And what about the importance of a consistent layout, right? So that if I'm a commissioner, if I get a report meeting to meeting, it kind of looks the same, or there's that same structure. Have you found a benefit to that?
It really does help a planning commissioner know, you know, I'm always interested in floodplains. Let me turn right to that. I'm going to look at that. I had a planner talk about thinking about a staff report as not something that you're going to read from beginning to end. Think of it as sort of like a web page that you're going to click around for what you find most important. If you have that consistent layout and consistency in where you're putting certain information, then a planning commissioner can, in essence, click around to what they find most important.
So for the planner that's preparing the staff report, you had said earlier that planners got into this, they want to help, they want to show the insights that they've shared. What's the role of the planner? So as they prepare the staff report, are they the facilitator, are they the scribe, are they the advocate? What role do they play in this whole process?
I think that, particularly with staff reports, planners can kind of get into the facilitator or processor role, that I'm the person who's accepting the application, I'm reviewing it, I'm getting the report done, and that can start to appear very bureaucratic and kind of be off-putting. But I think that when planners think of their role as actually I'm an advocate for the community, that can really breathe life into staff reports. You know, coming back to why is this important? What difference does this make to our community? And it's not necessarily being an advocate for the developer or an advocate for or against the application necessarily, but it's an advocate for the community. This is what our plan says is important for us to do. And nowadays, so many communities do regular surveys, and so you even know what your community's priorities are based on surveys. And so the planner knows the community and can really be that advocate for the community. I also think that staff reports can help planners lead. It's a new thing with the American Planning Association to focus on planners as leaders. And that's an uncomfortable role for some planners. We actually are very dedicated to that the planning commissioners, the city council, those are the leaders, and we help them. But we can help them by also leading, putting out suggestions, those good ideas that we run across in other communities or that the American Planning Association brings to our attention. We can put those into staff reports to say, it sounds like that in the past we've struggled with tree preservation. That's essential to this application as well. If you're interested in changing the ordinance, here's some things we're thinking about, and we could have a future study session on that.
And I think that's a terrific point, because I know a lot of planners, when we write staff reports, we're a little concerned about saying the city needs to do this, the city needs to do that, and that can appear a little bit out of place. But the idea of saying, if the city council is interested, or if the commission is interested, here's what you might want to do. We used to say, should the council consider adopting this, even though maybe the staff thought it wasn't, here are some conditions you might think about adding to it.
And the planning commission and the city council might decide, no, tree preservation not so important, and that's okay. But the staff is still putting that out there. And it's also, these staff reports, if you think about them, They are the regular way that planners communicate with their planning commission and their city council month after month after month. And if that's your main communication tool, I mean, really use it to your benefit and add in that additional information, that educational information, that really takes advantage of your expertise.
A staff report doesn't just include the work of the planning department or the community development department. There are other departments that are involved in the development process. What are some good ways or some things that you've seen in your work regarding how other departments become part of the process?
And that's important to remember that the staff in staff report isn't just the planner. It's the staff, it's public works, it's parks and recreation, it's police, it's fire. What I always enjoyed when I was a practicing planner was that meeting.
They bring up a really good point on this. And one of the things that North Topsail Beach, even though you, and I say you, we, you, even though you are a little town, North Topsail Beach, you are very fortunate to have a fire chief with like 30 years, police chief with like 30 years, building inspector with like 30 years, and a young planning director with, you know, pushing 28, 30. I don't think I have 30 yet. I lost track. But, you know, that's a lot. You know, yeah, is that like 4 of us? Is that 4? So 120 years experience between 4 of us? You know, and then you throw in Kate, and she's remarkable. She might not have 30, but she's like concentrated orange juice, right? So when you have all those folks that are in key positions, and you might think, well, Deb, what do you have to do with the fire chief? Right? When would you ever work with the fire chief? Well, when we're approving developments or permits that have accesses, driveways, that we have to facilitate emergency vehicle access. When we're looking at commercial development and we're looking at occupancy rates, you know, things like that. So we want to make sure that I'm emailing him plans, giving him a chance to weigh in his expertise, to where that application not just meets the zoning criteria or the land use criteria, but it's also meeting the fire code, right? It's also meeting, before they get to the application process, that it's meeting the building code. Give Ralph a chance to look at it. On the police chief side, there might be lighting issues, there might be roadway issues, there might be evacuation route issues, things that I might not even think of. You know, just as a public official that is plugged into the needs of the community outside of their profession, they might say, hey, have you thought about this? You know, just that other person to have a conversation with and go, you know what, I didn't think about that. Let me pick up the phone and call, you know, whatever state agency or somebody else. So whenever they say staff report, many times, and I brought that up with the property history when I was talking about the, you know, public works, fire code, all the rest of it. I hit on it, but I did want to emphasize that we are very lucky to have the experience in staff that we do. Go ahead, Ricky. I'm sorry.
That plan review meeting where the representative from the fire department's there, police, building
Should we just like
inspections,
fast
code
forward?
enforcement, we're all there looking at these applications, and then I'm taking all of their information and putting it in some.
You want just
And so to be able to have that in the report to show, it's not just me, the planner, saying this. Staff is saying whether this is a good idea or not. It's also that you as a planner can't know everything. I mean, you of the engineer or the building inspector that's been there for years, and just bringing that all to the table. And so in a staff report, you can have, you know, a checklist where it has the comments from the other departments or comments even from other agencies like the Department of Transportation, things like that. And you might have to decide how much to leave that into the main body of the report, or how much to perhaps put that in an appendix or attachments. But you can always direct people if you want to look at the utilities comments on this application, see page 20 in the attachments or something like that.
Part of the zoning approval process are the standards that the community has against which to consider a variation or a special use. How do you find that those are incorporated well into a staff report?
I think those things can particularly come into play when you're writing your recommendation and you're justifying that recommendation. You're saying, here's, you know, we're recommending approval, here's why. And really coming back to that, that it's not just the planner making these things up, there are concrete reasons why the recommendation is the way that it is. And then also coming back to, again, why this is important. Why is this important to the community? It's important to the community because we have these regulations, we have these plans. We've decided in the past that this is important for us, and then here's how with this application we're meeting those expectations or not.
And sometimes a zoning case can end up in litigation. And how does the staff report play a role in that, or should we always be anticipating that there may be litigation, or is that something that maybe is just in the background and not necessarily a main concern for the staff report?
I think that concern that any application at any time could become a court case is what makes it to where planners just dump a ton of information into the staff report. I think if you kind of think about, well, we have a template where it's helping us remember everything and again, show that, well, we checked this, we checked with Public Works, we checked with our ordinance. I mean, that's all in there, and that you're trying to, with the staff report, be fair. I think that a good template where you can make sure you've covered your bases and maybe do it with a check mark versus a ton of text, and then, you know, always coming back to, well, is this fair? I think then your staff report is going to serve you well if you go to court. And then also, again, having a good record in your file of what your correspondence with the applicant, things like that. That's your backup.
So we talked a lot about staff reports, and I'm sure everybody who's listening is now turning to their staff reports to see how they did. Any suggestions for how somebody might go about evaluating their staff report the way they've been doing it?
Well, one thing you can do is the staff report evaluation tool that myself and Ward Lyles with the University of Kansas put together. We have that available. And it really is just a tool to evaluate. It's not even good or bad. It's just, here are all these different things you can have in your staff report. And so take your staff report, go through the items on the tool, and then decide for yourself, your community, oh, do we also need to add that in? Or, oh, that would be a good way to format that. So you can use that. I also think using your planning commission as a focus group, even just having at a study session a discussion about the staff reports. What do you like? What do you not like? What comes to mind when you hear the word staff report? And just kind of having that discussion is useful. You can also, I would say, go back to a staff report for a case that maybe had a split vote or was controversial. Take that staff report, rewrite it in 3 or 4 different templates, 3 or 4 different formats or ways of presenting the information, and have the planning commission look at that, and then say, okay, you know, does this change anything? Is this more helpful? And they might say, well, I like the way you presented the background information in template number 2, but the way you did the analysis in template number 3, I really like that. And so it gives the planning commission something to respond to in some different examples and options. And then you can kind of redo the staff report with that input from the planning commission.
I think that's great advice. You know, staff reports are always written on deadline,
Yes.
and that can really be a challenge. And so the things you talked about in terms of kind of systematizing and checklists and that kind of thing can really help people. But what you're suggesting too is that don't get stuck in that as a format. You end up relying on that and going, oh, I don't have to start till Wednesday.
Yeah.
But to keep it kind of a living document or a living effort using your planning commission, I think is great advice.
Well, and since you're often doing those staff reports every month, you know, try something different. 1 month, do the staff reports this one way, see how the planning commission responds, see how the public responds. Next month, try something else, and just see what happens, what people like, what they respond to.
Great advice. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time and sharing your insights and your research and helping us help people build a better staff report.
Well, you're very welcome. And staff reports are so important that we shouldn't forget about them.
Agreed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hey, I have to say that was funny, but it was almost one of the most, I don't want to say it was boring.
Basic.
Basic's good. But staff reports are something that, you know, I look back, I think I kept the staff reports that I had when I came down from Virginia, you know, because you always feel comfortable with that, you know, type of format that you have. And so the other one that I have is a little looser depending on what the topic is. But I start out with like the agenda item and the background, like the history. And then that kind of gives me this free flow depending on what that, you know, broader topic is. If it's something that you, I'm trying to think of something that's like that, that's not so land use, but more like, say for ordinance, like wetland ordinance or something like that, where you would want, you know, what was the directive or how did we come to this point, and then give you a little bit, give you like a little short background and give you a draft, something to kind of work with or push up against. So that's kind of just like a little bit of a blank canvas one that I use, but it's still structured, giving you a background. But certainly for land use and dealing with property, I think this one lends itself a little bit better, and especially for consistency documentation, like they mentioned. But so are there any questions, comments? I know that was kind of dry for y'all. The next training session is going to be on the comprehensive plan, which for us is Cameron Land Use Plan. So you're going to hear a lot of times when they talk about comprehensive plan that it's non-regulatory, non-enforceable. That's true for everywhere but the 20 coastal counties in North Carolina. In 20 coastal counties in North Carolina, that Cameron Land Use Plan is enforceable. It is regulatory. So if it says you shall, then it means you shall, and so that's a little bit of a nuance. But I just want to give you a heads up on that. So that'll be good for us to kind of get into. And I think our last one was adopted in 2020 or 2021. I think I want to say 2021, not too long ago. So it's still rather fresh. So any questions, concerns, anything else? Okay.
Can I call for a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank